Jane Gobin of the Iwokrama International Center for Rainforest Conservation Development, Honorable Rashli Jackson, former Minister of Foreign Affairs, Mr. Lance Carberry, one of the pioneers of the center, Ms. Mikiko Tanaka, UNDP resident representative, environmentalists, stakeholders, partners, friends of Iwokrama, invitees, members of the media, ladies and gentlemen. The frightening spectacles of the Atlantic Ocean's waters rushing unimpeded onto the rice paddies at Danzig, the spectacle of the selling at Parika in full flood, the spectacle of Omai's cavernous mined-out craters, of Aurora's depleted forests, or Kuyuni's turbid waters, where I used to swim as a young officer 50 years ago, now contaminated with gold mining effluent, of Rupununi's savanna fires and shell beaches disappearing mangroves. These sites are nothing if not apocalyptic. The environment must be preserved and protected for the benefit of our people, for the planet, and for present and future generations. We have much to lose if we are careless with the priceless, precious, and peerless resource of our environment. Guyana's biodiversity is more precious than petroleum. It must be preserved and protected to prevent further damage to the physical environment, to mitigate the effects of climate change, and to provide support and services necessary for life. The protection of our biodiversity can help to reduce and even reverse the adverse effects of climate change. Biodiversity, plants, animals, microorganisms, and ecosystems in which they exist support life. They support the terrestrial ecosystems, mitigate the greenhouse effect by increasing carbon storage. Reforestation and land reclamation reduce soil erosion and land degradation and help to restore soil nutrients and insect and plant species. The protection of flora and fauna can reverse biodiversity loss, improve food security, and provide services of the forests. The protection of the mangrove forest, so vital to the security of our coastline, where more than 80% of the population lives and where much of the country's infrastructure is located, and the preservation of the forests and their products will support the livelihoods of thousands of Guyanese. The integrity of our rivers and freshwater sources, which I think Dr. Thomas calls liquid silver, white gold. She's gone up from silver. If you live in a river, you know it's very much the white gold in truth. All of these are necessary to sustain human survival. Guyana, as I've said over and over again, is beautiful, blissful, and bountiful. The country's landscape, its coastland, its grasslands, its highlands, its islands, its lakes, rainforests, rivers, waterfalls, and wetlands paint a picture of a pristine paradise. These lands and waters are the habitat of our giants, as you've seen in the movie, the anaconda, the anthieta, the arapaima, the armadillo, bat, caiman, capybara, eagles, jaguar, manatee, stork, tapir, turtle, vulture, and many more, which are world-class giants. The waters and forests abound with animal and plant life, including more than 8,000 plant species, 467 fish species, 814 bird species, 130 amphibians, 179 reptiles, 225 mammals, and many more. Guyana, as you can see from the map, is at the center of the Guyana Shield, one of the world's last remaining tracts of pristine rainforest, spread over 2.7 million square kilometers, an area that is bigger than Greenland, and encompassing much of Guyana, Suriname, and parts of Brazil, Colombia, and Venezuela. The shield's biodiversity is unparalleled. Its pristine rainforests, largely uncontaminated aquatic ecosystems, and other intact ecosystems contain 15% of the world's freshwater reserves. The shield is vital to the planet's survival. It is part of the lungs of the Earth because of the environmental and ecosystem services it provides. The shield's forests sequester carbon and mitigate the effects of greenhouse gas emissions. They aid in the regulation of the water cycle, water quality, and pollination. They are sources of food, medicinal products, and timber and non-timber products. My friends, Guyana's natural capital is a vital resource which must be preserved and protected. It is a source of wealth, including its minerals, timber, flora, and fauna, and which provide our citizens with their livelihoods. It is a source of environmental and invaluable ecosystem services necessary for Earth's survival, and it is a part of the country's patrimony, which we inherited from our foreparents, and which we must bequeath to our children and grandchildren. Guyana's environment is a global resource which is necessary to stem global biodiversity loss and freshwater depletion. The Global Assessment Report on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services 2019 found that more than 1 million animal and plant species are at risk of extinction. Extinction is forever. Water stress, depletion of aquifers, along with an increased demand for water, are placing pressures on the world's freshwater reserves. The protection of the environment remains vital amid these threats. It is in this scenario that Guyana has promulgated a Green State Development Strategy, Vision 2040, as the country's roadmap towards transitioning towards becoming a green state. The strategy aligns economic development with safeguarding the environment. It is a model which aims at protecting the environment and preventing damage and degradation while promoting economic development. The strategy aims at an inclusive, low-carbon path of sustainable development, among other things. It will enhance the nation's hard-earned and well-deserved reputation for environmental stewardship. The strategy recognizes that our country is about to become a petroleum-producing state. This will be the most transformative economic development in over a century, a development that will boost economic growth and will provide increased resources for national development. Petroleum is ephemeral. I know one prime minister said oil don't spoil, it could run out. The environment is eternal. An extinction of our species is forever. The environment is essential to Earth's existence and will remain so long after oil reserves have been exhausted. Guyana plans to utilize the revenue from petroleum production to advance the green development agenda, among other things. Environmental conservation and protection are key elements in this agenda. The Green State will preserve and extend the country's protected areas system, which includes Iwokrama, and most recently the Commemoration protected area, which encompasses over 7,000 square kilometers. bigger than Trinidad, which has been accredited to the Queen's Commonwealth canopy with the permission of the community. Did I say something funny? Iwokrama is at the center of this evolving national and international environmental order. As you heard, it is the child of the Langkawi Declaration on the Environment. The Langkawi Declaration was promulgated 3 years before the United Nations Conference on the Environment and Development in Rio de Janeiro. It was promulgated 20 years before the United Nations Climate Change Conference held in Copenhagen in 2009. It was promulgated more than a quarter of a century before the landmark Paris Agreement of December 2015. It was a pioneering declaration. The Langkawi Declaration, issued at the 11th Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting in Malaysia in 1989, sounded the early warning of the threats to Earth's environment. The declaration identified the greenhouse effect. It identified the depletion of the ozone layer, acid rain, marine pollution, land degradation, and biodiversity loss as among the world's most foremost environmental threats. That was a generation ago. The Langkawi Declaration noted that many environmental hazards were transnational in character and therefore necessitated international responses. It charted a 16-point program for committing the Commonwealth to take immediate action on the environment. The program called for support for activities related to the conservation of biological diversity and genetic resources, significant areas of virgin forests, and other protected natural habitat. The declaration urged also the strengthening of efforts by developing countries in sustaining forest management and the manufacture and export of high-value forest products. Guyana responded promptly to the declaration by demonstrating how a small state could make a big hit, a big gift to the world. Guyana committed to forested areas, you've heard of 371,000 hectares, an area bigger than Malta. That is the island, not the... As a model for conservation and sustainable forest management. It was an ambitious and audacious initiative by a small state in response to a worldwide threat. The Iwokrama Covenant was sealed on the 9th of November 1995 with the signing of the agreement between the government of the Cooperative Republic of Guyana and the Commonwealth Secretariat for the establishment of the Iwokrama International Center for Rainforest Conservation and Development. The agreement represented a partnership between Guyana, the Commonwealth, the local and global community, aimed at, and I quote, undertaking research, training, and the development of technologies which will promote the conservation and the sustainable and equitable use of tropical rainforests in a manner that will lead to lasting ecological, economic, and social benefits to the people of Guyana and to the world in general. Iwokrama was a bellwether of environmental programs. It represented a model of how the Declaration's objectives could be fulfilled through international cooperation. That model required the mobilization of adequate assets to ensure that the objectives of the agreement bringing Iwokrama into being could be realized. International crises, the financial crisis in Asia, 1997, the global financial crisis of 2007, the food crisis beginning in 2008, the energy crisis in the early years of this decade, diverted donor preferences and priorities away from supporting major environmental initiatives, such as Iwokrama. The center, as a result, has been hard up, it's been unable to access adequate assets to execute its mission fully. The center is here to stay, however, and remains relevant to the national responses to local and global environmental threats. It is part of the solution to the adverse effects of climate change, such as extreme weather, rising sea levels, precipitous levels of biodiversity loss, and diminishing freshwater supplies, to which the world is seeking solutions. It is immense, impressive, irreplaceable. It provides priceless environmental and ecological services to the earth and remains a vital element in the protection of the world's biodiversity, its fresh air, and its freshwater supplies. It is central to Guyana's transition to becoming a green state, and is part of the Guyana heartland, as you've heard before, the green heart, the country's rich natural capital, and a cradle and conservatory of thousands of species of biodiversity, some of which are among the rarest in the world. My friends, Iwokrama must change if it is to survive. It can no longer subsist entirely on the old covenant, which played a pivotal role over the past 30 years. The center is part of the national patrimony, and Guyanese, first and foremost, must bear the greatest responsibility for the center's future development without cutting the umbilical cord to the international community. Dinosaurs became extinct because they could not adapt to change. If organisms cannot change, they cannot survive. Change is imperative and indispensable for improvement. Iwokrama will not survive unless it adapts to the challenges imposed by the current climate change. Change is taking place at a rapid pace and is improving our knowledge of the environment. Institutions which do not prepare for the continuous changes in the environment face the danger of becoming irrelevant. Iwokrama will not be allowed to become a lifeless monument or a museum, or worse, a timber grant or a gold mine. Iwokrama will not be allowed to become an environmental theme park or playground for celebrities. A new covenant must be crafted to ensure Iwokrama's survival and success in perpetuity. The new covenant will be functional. Iwokrama, under the new covenant, will be about education rather than entertainment, and research rather than recreation. The center must become a schoolhouse for students aiming to study the sciences, biology, botany, and zoology. How can you have a botanical garden without botanists? How can you have a zoological park without zoologists? Iwokrama, with its rich biodiversity, is pivotal to positioning our economy onto a green growth pathway. It is our key to protecting our environmental patrimony. The pursuit of sustainable development cannot be achieved unless there is an unobstructed obligation to the protection of our biodiversity. Iwokrama, with yet undiscovered and unexplored resources, is essential to our economic existence. Iwokrama can teach the world lessons on biodiversity. Sanctuaries for the conservation and preservation of our rich flora and fauna will be established. I iterate my government's intention, with the support of the international partners, to make Iwokrama into a world-class institute for biodiversity research, an academy of excellence to serve the education needs of our children for generations to come. Iwokrama will be the home of an international institute for biodiversity to support its educational efforts. The institute will allow students and researchers from the continent and the Caribbean and the rest of the world to come to Iwokrama to study its biodiversity and to increase knowledge and understanding of our vital ecosystems. And as Mr. Gobin can tell you, one of my first moves was to make the Fairview Aerodrome safe and to extend its length to allow people to leave the Eugene Karai Airport, put aside a glass of coconut water, and 30 minutes later, enjoy a glass of coconut water at Iwokrama. You now have a much better airstrip than before. My friends, one of the most depressing experiences over the last 4.5 years was my visit to the University of Guyana's Center for Biological Diversity. I was almost moved to tears by the state of that institution. I saw a cemetery rather than a laboratory of biodiversity. It was a disservice to our nation to have allowed such an institution to fall into neglect, an institution which was established to promote and preserve the country's biodiversity. Iwokrama will not suffer that fate. I don't know what has happened to the center at Turkine over the last 3 years. It could not get much worse than it was when I started. The new covenant will be unveiled during our decade of development, 2020 to 2029. It envisages Iwokrama as a living repository of the country's biodiversity. Iwokrama will become the home of Guyana's rich and diverse flora and fauna. The government will establish at Iwokrama a world-class center of excellence for students and researchers interested in increasing their knowledge of our essential ecosystems. The decade will also witness Guyana's honoring its commitments to place an additional 2 million hectares under conservation in accordance with our nationally determined commitments under the Paris Agreement. It will pursue measures to preserve our biodiversity and ecosystem services and to proscribe, listen for it, to proscribe the exploitation of wildlife. Okay. Okay. Thank you for your applause. And to promulgate policies aimed at ensuring low rates of deforestation, improve timber monitoring, a high level of timber legality, and greater value-added activities in the forestry sector to augment carbon storage in long-use wood products and promote low-emission, low-carbon development of the country's natural resources. My friends, Guyana has been a trailblazer in global environmental protection. Iwokrama has demonstrated how small states can punch above their weight in offering solutions to global environmental problems. A new era is about to dawn for Iwokrama. It will be developed into a schoolhouse for studying Guyana's biodiversity. I congratulate the Iwokrama International Center to Rainforest Conservation Development on this important milestone, the 30th anniversary of the pledge of the concession. I wish the center continued success and pledge my government's continued support for refashioning of the covenant, which will ensure that Iwokrama remains in perpetuity in service to generations of Guyanese yet unborn. I thank you.